pretty critical to our medium-term aspirations in terms of public transport. In terms of infrastructure, we've delivered the Albany Highway, the Otahuhu bus interchange. We're developing the Manukau and Pukekohe bus rail interchanges. As you know, the heads of agreement with the Crown on CRL is in place, and the enabling works are well underway and progressing well. The final ATAP and TFAG reports are in place, and this is really good because that gives us the basis to move forward. We're making progress on the cycleways, but the reality is that we have absorbed the population of Tauranga into Auckland in the last 3 years, 127,000 people, and we have got some serious issues with congestion. And obviously these are issues that we looking to find solutions to that are kind of more urgent than they might have been, because the pressure is mounting very quickly, and not the least of which would be the airport.
Yes, I must admit I got up the earliest I've got up this year, and I left the earliest, and it took me the longest to get here.
Yes, well, I think if you speak to the people at the port, they will tell you that the increase in importation of motor vehicles has been 22% this year, let alone heavy machinery. So, you know, this is, I guess, the last comment I'd make before we take questions. One of the issues we face, and it's a collective we, is that the decision-making processes are not moving anywhere near as quickly as the problems are developing. And this is a critical issue for us as multi-layered decision-making processes. And collectively, I think early in the new year, we need to actually see how we can lubricate these processes, because, for example, mass transit through the isthmus into the airport, you know, that's now caught in a study, would bus be better than light rail? And all of these factors, important as they are, actually just diminish the decision to actually move to delivery, which is pretty critical for us. Happy to take questions.
Hey, we have Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, congratulations first on the CRL winning Infrastructure Sustainable Council of Australia Award. That's fantastic. And the millionth hop card being issued, and your financial performance is on track. But my question is around the things that potentially aren't on track, because that's what we're here for. So of the 28 KPIs measured, 7 are not on track in 2 focus areas, which are basically prioritising public transport and elevating customer experience. Could you explain to us why potentially those targets haven't been achieved, and what are you doing to get them back on track?
Yes, I'll just touch on the public transport to commence with. The targets a few years ago, and perhaps we should frame up a paper on this for the council. We engaged Deloitte to do a report to determine what was possible to achieve looking at other jurisdictions given the level of funding. And the Deloitte report, which was a pretty disciplined report, revealed that the aspirations to double public transport in a set period of time had not been achieved in any other jurisdiction, and those jurisdictions had more funding. So they gave an estimate of where, or forecast where they thought we could achieve, and we're actually working towards that. These figures were figures that there was not necessarily easy agreement about, so they are aspirational figures. And in order for us to achieve these kind of figures, there will be more investment required, but Mark will touch on what we're actually doing and planning to accelerate around bus lanes, which is really important for that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the SOI targets, so rail, we do expect to be on target for this year. For the rapid and frequent growth above the rest of the public transport growth, we also expect to be on track. The total patronage is currently forecast to be about 0.5% to 1% below where we would hope it to be in the middle of the year, and that's primarily around the bus services. So we've seen some decline in the first half of the year in south and west in particular. So those service networks are not what they should be. Obviously, we've implemented the new network in the south in October, and as Lester said, the initial 1 month worth of results in November are looking very positive. So we've got overall across bus and rail an 8% growth in the south for public transport use, which is above the rest of the region put together. So while it's only 1 month, it's hopefully looking good for the future in terms of the new network. The next part of the new network will be May, June in the west, so we prioritise the south and the west because that's where bus services have not been what they should be. The other things that we are doing, we've obviously put in simpler fares in August. That's seen an initial around 20% increase in transfers. So that's got its intention in terms of trying to create a multimodal network. Also this year we are targeting 27 kilometres worth of bus lanes to be rolled out, on top of 19 kilometres last year. So, and also for operating hours for bus lanes, those will be increased in February and March prior to what we call March Madness happening. In addition, on bus, we're increasing capacity by around 5% for March, again in advance of that March Madness phenomenon.
Councillor
Yes, so one
Cashmore.
point I'll just add is the implementation of the network is not able to be speeded up. That'll take as long as it takes, but it is important we do that well, because for the short, medium and long term, that is the major initiative for transport in Auckland.
Just one supplementary question, if I may, because you covered the public transport, but the elevating customer experience, I think, is very important to try and meet that target, and currently we're not, particularly in road quality. So what are we doing about that?
So if I can just comment on that through the chair, the biggest problem there is the level of construction going on everywhere. So when the surveys go out, you're getting a reflection on the dissatisfaction with the level of construction going on throughout the city and the operation. So it's one of those damned if you do and damned if you don't type situations. It is a concern, and what we're trying to do is actually see if we can improve our temporary traffic management plans so that the customer experience is minimised, or the dissatisfaction is minimised during those construction programs.
Okay, I'm not going to take any more requests to speak because I have 6 people and there's 12 minutes. So, Councillor Cashmore.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Chairman. First of all, gentlemen, on the rollout of the network in the south of the bus, thank you. It's going very well. I was expecting to be inundated with complaints and terrible stories, but have actually, I think, been won. And the uptake's massive. 1,000 people more using the bus services of Pukekohe alone, and Papakura is even more than that. So thank you for that. It's going well, and well done for the research around it. You made a comment, Mr. Chairman, about the slowness of the decision making to alleviate the project. I guess we're specifically speaking about areas where there is cross-government subsidy or complete government subsidy. So we're talking, motorway increasement of capacity levels, and also when you talk about airport particularly, there's been a large focus there recently. What in your mind do we need to do to speed up that decision making, and 2, what else can we do to deliver the actual physical works faster, as we see in offshore countries such as 24/7 builds?
So thank you. I'll just introduce that and ask David to comment more. I think that we need to be collectively, all agencies, ourselves, council, all the government agencies, really unified on the critical nature of pace, because we can't stop, there's no handbrake to put on the problem, so we need to be able to provide the solutions more quickly. And if anything, we find, at least our perception, is that the processes are slower than they used to be as the problems are speeding up. But I'll ask David to just make specific comment.
So there's 2 sides to your question through the chair. One is the rate of decision making. I think the scale and size of the projects and the moving to, shall I say, different modes, whether it's light rail or better interfacing of multiple modes, is creating a desire for more and more people to ask more and more questions based on less and less information that they have themselves, to be blunt. So that is actually slowing the process down, and the scale of the projects just means that the dollar sums are quite big, so the due diligence level gets longer and longer, and somewhere in this process we're going to have to develop an acceptance of trust and capability and actually start backing the people who've done a lot. The second issue in terms of improving the rate of delivery is probably a function around consenting, because most of the projects have fairly tight construction periods in terms of when they can't work, and so that has to be fed into it, and it's a responsibility to consider people other than those in the construction zone per se. So I understand why, but that's one of the limiting factors. The last thing I'd say is that right now the level of construction in New Zealand collectively is probably putting pressure on the ability of the construction industry to deliver. And in that regard, I think the most critical thing, which probably is strategic rather than a specific operational one, is actually to create a pipeline of work over the next 5 to 15 years, not thinking about next year and the year after, or 3 years in the LTP or whatever it might be, because if we want more construction capability here, we won't get international players coming in for one big project. They'll come for a pipeline of work, and the ability to actually compete across that over time is what will give us the capability.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To Dr. Levy or Mr. Warburton, 3 questions. The first one's very specific. In terms of performance measures, the annual cycle movements in the Auckland City Centre was measured at 364,000, but your target was 1.8 million. So the first question is, what was the reason for the shortfall in that target? Because it misses the target quite considerably. Maybe if I put the 3 questions together and you can take a note of them. The second is in relation to mass transit to the airport, and having spent an hour and a half trying to get out of the airport last week, the urgency of the situation was impressed on me personally. But when can we expect a decision on bringing forward a mass transit to the airport, given that it's not in the first 10-year plan period? Obviously, that's just not tolerable. We've got to deal with that problem now. The third question is on ATAP, and while I congratulate you and Council on getting a result from ATAP, isn't it true that if we implement everything in ATAP, we won't stop or reverse congestion, we will simply slow the growth in congestion? And an associated question to that is, we're $4 billion short, a deficit over 10 years on ATAP. Where do you think that money's going to come from?
Good question.
Well, Christian, the last one, we were going to ask you that.
I thought I'd get in first.
If I could just start on ATAP, we're just discussing this in our board meeting. I think it's an excellent initiative. I think it's brilliant to get alignment and unity. I think we just have to be a lot more realistic about the pace of implementation and the distribution of projects within decades. That's a moment in time and based on an interpretation of information. We do know for a fact that the population growth of Auckland is chronically underestimated, and that would be our perception in ATAP as well. So I think in terms of ATAP, we've got a brilliant basis to work and to work together, and I think now we should be reflecting on the speed of implementation, and rather than just what the projects are. In terms of the funding, I actually think that, I know you've raised, Mr. Mayor, the regional fuel tax. The source of the money is less relevant to us, I guess, as a delivery agency than the money itself. But I actually think that, to be realistic, we really need to also start working now on demand management interventions, because we will need those sooner than later, and the longer we wait to develop them, or the legislation or whatever the enabling environment is, the longer it'll take. In terms of the cycling, can I pass that one to Richard, because he's got the detail?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The 364,000 target is obviously only a quarterly target, so you multiply that by 4, we'll get somewhere near the 1.8 million that we forecast for the year. Without the measuring basis for this is based on historic measures, and what we'll do from next year is actually change around the way in which we measure the cycling targets through to our new network that we're building, rather than the historic counting point. So along Key Street, for example, it's only been open a few weeks and it's 103,000 this morning or something, getting around 1,000 a day through that. So the new network, as we build it, is proving to be quite successful, but we need to be counting the use of the network, not the historic counting sites from years ago. So